Your project is stalled. Yeah, lots of restrictions.
Yeah, they do.
So they remain, keep their character.
Ooh, you know what?
Yes.
Cause I have to recuse myself for a couple items
Rather than trying.
for a public hearing for these pages. Those,
For the ADOs.
I wonder if it's worthwhile. I saw Maketta's email and said she could maybe finagle something if there's an hour time where we do that. 'Cause otherwise we won't have a.
What's
we won't have a
your,
quorum.
what's your,
Courtney,
There's one.
my wife will be, she's the applicant for two of them for her compliance.
do we wanna,
Is Mike Hewitt the other applicant?
I can
Courtney's
text
the
you
one for Powerhouse and Mike Hewitt is on the other.
By the time
She's
the
involved
end
with
of
both
the
of them, so I
hour,
have to recuse
I'm
myself. I
gonna
can't
share
either way.
it,
Well, we have a quorum, but 3 votes doesn't carry it.
Right.
think,
Yeah, so it's kind of.
Roughly.
But I guess it's a planning commission, so you could, they could just take notes.
They could.
Right, so it's not.
I chill.
Learn to chill,
Oh,
and I feel a lot better.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
my foot would be moving, I got things.
Later on. 48
So,
seconds.
well, good, I'm glad it worked out, I really like her, she's very nice. Her dad was a concrete contractor for forever in town, but he's.
But I'm climbing out of it.
Now,
McKenna does say she, on this email on Friday, she said she will be joining remotely,
I just texted her, but yeah, so.
Well, and I guess too, what we were just talking about is since this is planning commission, it can't pass with a favorable recommendation, but it could say 3 in favor and then and 1 abstention.
We can't hold our meeting without a quorum.
Yeah,
Well,
but
we
you
have it,
can
but I'm just saying
recuse
for
yourself
those.
and have a quorum, can't you? We would have a quorum, he just
I
wouldn't
haven't
vote.
seen you in a long
Abstain
time.
from the vote maybe, and
Yeah.
just abstain.
And so it won't go to the commission if you all were favorable to it.
Okay.
It just wouldn't go with a favorable
I try
recommendation.
not to, but I got
But I would
this,
assume that could be noted. It was,
this going
like a
on.
favorable
If-
recommendation with the vote being.
Yeah.
In favor.
So it's just being moved, but we recorded anyway, right?
yeah.
That's
That's fine.
yeah, we don't need to block, that's
Yeah.
done. Worst comes to worst, we have to do it again, which we'd have to do anyway if that wasn't the case, so,
Right.
and then we'll see if we can get McKenna on, so. That works for me. All right, it is 4:31. I will call us to order on July 10th. How did that happen? Oh, my word. We will begin with citizens to be heard. If you're all here to speak during the public hearings, then you don't need to speak now. If anyone is here to make a comment on an item that is not on our agenda or an item that is not on our agenda, but is one of our public hearing items, now is your opportunity to be heard. But it looks like no one's raising their hands. And we have nobody online, so we will move on to approval of meeting minutes.
Well, I don't know if on the very top of the meeting minutes, that on the title there, it says MFR for some reason, was that intended to be? something?
Was surprised by that.
Might have just been a.
Could be like
a word typo thing.
The only thing I don't think this is a huge deal. I did notice in our recording of the straw poll, we didn't record the results, and it just kind of read a bit strange as I took a straw poll and I declared some finding. I think when we take straw polls, we might just want to note at a very high level the results, just so it's clear where that resulting finding came from. But that was the only comment that I had. Any additional comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, this is to have us to have the number of, the minutes, not changing them. I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Okay. And we have a second?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, great. Okay, perfect. All in
I'm
favor?
trying to find it in there.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Abstain.
3 in favor, none opposed, 1 abstention. I skipped over ex parte communications and disclosures. So we did have 1 disclosure already shared. Steve, do you want to just repeat that for the record?
Yep, I will be recusing myself from the public hearing items for ADO rezones on Powerhouse Lane and Desert Road and Mesa Road.
Okay. Any other ex parte communications or disclosures?
I talked to Sarah Melnikoff about, alternative, development overlay on Powerhouse Road. I didn't talk very much. She's, concerned about how much development's going on, because of course, there's two big things at the bottom and some stuff at the top. And I basically said, well, write something for the planning commission, and didn't talk very much more about it at all.
Any others? Right, we'll move on to our, we don't have any presentations, but we'll move on to our planning commission.
I don't have much. I have two things. One, OB, I've been working with OB. We are gonna have a water workshop on January 26th at Utah State University at 6 p.m. It is gonna be Mark Stilson talking about water rights in the valley. He's already done this for the county. And then Arnie Hillquist talking about, did I say that right?
Yeah, we got it.
January 26th, July 26th.
And is it at 6 o'clock?
Come on, I'm just on the ball. It's only half a year. That's right.
6 months out.
That's right.
My body relaxes. I felt that January.
July 26th, and Arnie's gonna kind of just do a whole, just overview of geology and hydrology in Castle and Spanish Valley. So just water 101 is what we're talking about. Do you want to add to
And
that?
lots of time for questions, so.
Lots of time
Hour
for questions,
presentation, hour for questions, so people can,
right?
get all the questions they want,
Yeah.
or, say, well, I don't disagree with this particular part. And we're
This-
gonna do that on two other following presentations.
Right, so this is a three-part series. The second part will be Thomas Lockmer from Utah State University. He's already presented. You guys already know that. Jack Schmidt, who's from Utah State, he's the Colorado River guru, and Jane Belknap, so a local ecologist. And so kind of talking about more just the science of water, but more in depth. And then lastly will be just water service providers in the valleys, right? So Moab Irrigation Company, GWISA, et cetera, and so on. So just kind of just trying to lay those foundations for people that don't know water. We want to
That's
make
at
sure
6 at USU.
6 at USU, and there is a Zoom link. So you can zoom in. And Alicia's gonna start, Oliver's gonna start getting that information out. And then the only other big thing I want to make sure that the Water Conservancy District at Grand Water and Sewer has a vacancy. With Rex Tanner's passing, that vacancy is now noticed. I'm just encouraging people to apply. It's an extremely important board. They control Kings Lake in the valley, and it is a Grand County rep. Right, so there's 5 individuals on that board, 4 from Grand and 1 from San Juan County. So highly recommend people apply for that board. Pushing that out.
For the water presentations, one thing I would love to hear from the experts on the panel or people in the audience. I feel like we've had so many fascinating public workshops and town halls on hydrology in the valley overall. I would love to know what we can do from a place of agency as a community to make better use of our water, whether that is looking at the differences of retention versus detention, infrastructure, looking at conservation policies that have worked in other communities,
Right,
how other people are balancing where we have vested growth already in the system, how other communities are balancing that with
right.
conservation. I just think it would be, I feel as though I hear a lot of people going to these events and sharing that it was really fascinating, but how do you turn that into
Right.
action?
Right,
It's just a
Right.
follow-up.
That's
Yeah.
number 4, huh?
That might be number 4.
It's
I
just
know,
nothing
every
to
time we
see.
get going, we're like, well, now we have another one.
Well, we have some,
Yeah, well, it seems like the groundwork of info is kind of getting
Right,
there's disagreement on the facts.
well, we're trying to
Or what-
make sure
whatever.
there's not, right,
Yeah,
right.
If
right,
there's
right.
even facts.
Right, right,
And
right.
So where did, Yeah, I attended a couple of minutes like, well, what do you do with that?
Right,
You
no,
know,
I
what
like
should we
that.
do?
That
I
might
do
be
too.
number 4.
And, you know, somebody like Jeff Adams,
That's
there's
right.
other, he first
Okay,
comes to mind because he's into, you know, conserving rain off roofs and swales,
yeah,
et cetera. And there's
Okay.
gotta be other people to balance things out.
we don't have enough to do, but we
No.
are on it. We are working on it.
We'll think about it.
Yeah, we'll think about, no, we will, no, I like that idea. Yeah, I think that's great.
Very exciting, very exciting. Any other updates?
That's it.
Okay, all right. So. Let's see, where are we? General business. Action items, discussion items. Welcome to our new county engineer. All right, we got there.
Just wanted to give a warm welcome for Dan Stenta, our new county engineer. He was hired on about a month ago and just started, he's in just 2 weeks now, I think is where we're at. So Dan is, he has a wealth of knowledge of Grand County. He's got 24 years of experience working here in this area and surrounding counties, both in the public and private sectors. He previously worked as the Moab City engineer and as district engineer for the BLM. And Dan will be working on review of current development applications, reviewing civil plans, performing on-site inspections before, during, and after construction. He will also be taking a lead role in shepherding the county's capital improvement projects along, lending his engineering skills to help out with the town boat ramp renovation, and even assisting with the county's update to our plans, like our stormwater master plan, construction standards, and our, and advising us and working with us on land use code updates that might need an engineering perspective. So we're really happy to have Dan on. So far, it's been wonderful. So, yeah. I think it's gonna really improve things for a lot of different aspects of the county in general. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay, moving on. Yeah.
All right, our US Department of Transportation Safe Streets for All grant application.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to give you guys an update. We did get this done last week. It was, the due date for submitting was today. And the city really was the lead on this grant application, and the county was is a partner. But we worked to help write the grant narrative and come up with the scope. And so basically what it came down to is the funding request would support completion of an equity analysis to go into the UTMP, which I guess, so the Unified Transportation Master Plan is kind of what we're trying to make into a safety action plan according to USDOT, so we can get more implementation funding in the future. There's 3 years left of this funding opportunity. And so last year we didn't get the implementation funding, so we've been advised that we needed to go back and kind of do some supplemental planning to bolster the UTMP to really make it this action plan as they define it for safety. And so part of that is doing an equity analysis, so kind of reaching out to underserved communities in the Moab area and the valley, and just making sure that we're prioritizing transportation projects that will be beneficial to all, you know, that kind of thing. So we're gonna go back and do that. It'll be assessing some of our processes and our policies around creating processes for safety, transportation planning. So looking at our construction standards and our land use code, our active transportation master plan, and how those all integrate, and what we can do to bolster those as well. And then the city really wants to work on a development of a complete streets ordinance. The county may have some issues applying complete streets within some of our rural areas, so we're kind of going to be more focused on looking at our construction standards. And the third one that I talked about is assessing our processes and our policies kind of as more than the complete streets ordinance. But we might be able to take some of the stuff from that, what they develop, and use it in our land use code. And then the other big thing, planning initiative that will be funded through this is creating supplemental roadway assessments for Mill Creek Corridor, Spanish Valley Drive, in all of the main intersections going into Spanish Valley Drive to ensure that we're, you know, creating multimodal opportunities, not only on Spanish Valley Drive, but like all of the streets that connect our neighborhoods going to Spanish Valley Drive, so especially Spanish Trail. And then, yeah, Mill Creek is a really big one they want to work on the city as well, because that's their corridor. But we have county land all around it where we're planning for more density and it's an emerging node, so yeah, so that'll be that, getting those roadway planning assessments done will make us much more eligible next year to get implementation funding for actual like construction projects. So yeah, we're excited and I hope this is successful. We'll see.
When do you find out?
I think October is when we will find out, yeah. Awesome. And let's see, that's all I had on that one.
Any questions? Cool. We'll move on to an update on the water conservation ordinance.
Okay, so I had this on the agenda. I wanted to keep the discussion going and kind of check in. We haven't made a ton of progress on this yet, but I did speak with Corey at the planning department at the city. We had a meeting last week and we talked about their current landscaping requirements ordinance that they've gone through the planning commission. And now they're going to be bringing that to their city council. I think it's July 26th for a workshop. And it's a pretty big comprehensive update to their code. And looking at what they're drafting, I've kind of started to parse out what might be applicable for the county to also mirror, and so that we have like consistency across our requirements. But one of the things that is interesting, I thought I would just bring up with you all is they're proposing like obviously maximum landscaping requirements for your yard, but also a minimum. So they're proposing a 25% minimum landscape area in order to ensure that yards or properties aren't just completely xeriscaped, because of the concern that if we go too far in that direction, we create kind of the heat island effect in the valley, and that some landscaping is actually good, but that 25% minimum still has requirements for species type, obviously. So you would want to be doing low water consumption, like planting and that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting, something we might want to consider as well.
Are there examples of other communities in Utah or other communities in the arid west that you're looking at that have these already written?
Yes, St. George, Washington County, I think it's just St. George. I don't think the county has anything. Maybe they do, but St. George I've heard has a good one. I think there was a couple, that Corey and I were talking about. I wrote them down, but
I was
Yeah,
gonna say
maybe Tucson, yeah.
Seems like they're
Yeah.
pretty,
they
yeah,
would have a really good one.
yeah.
Elisa, does anybody else have this kind of minimum? Because I certainly know black pavement's
Right.
deadly.
Right.
What
Also
is
just-
our kind of whitish gray
Right.
stuff? Not, they certainly wouldn't be as bad. Do they actually maybe reflect the heat or? So
Right.
do you
I
know
don't
what
know.
the
I haven't-
science is behind this?
I haven't come across other examples, but we're definitely in the research phase, and so I think we'll keep
Yeah.
looking at examples from other jurisdictions and see what we can find in terms of that. Yeah.
Interesting.
From what I understood, is they're trying to get this landscape code, so then people, if they want to rip up their sod, can get reimbursed. That's
Right,
kind of
yeah,
the
right,
whole
exactly.
The plant
That was-
savers, and that's why we're
Yeah.
doing it too, so that we can
Okay.
become a county.
Yeah.
Where the residents can apply for this rebate program through the Water Savers program, state.
Yeah.
rebates.
I've heard some of my neighbors talk about some of this landscaping stuff and their knee-jerk reaction is like, well, are we just criminals for planting, and I'm like, I don't know, like, I just kind of hear that feedback from people. It's like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, there's gonna be some
keep off
pushback
my
for
grass.
sure. Yes.
I don't think you're gonna force anybody to
Yeah.
remove their grass. I
Yeah.
think it's
Right.
gonna be
It's an
It's-
incentive.
That's
incentivized,
what-
it's an incentive.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's kind of, and then
Yeah.
it'd be more like new construction stuff will be like,
Right.
when that's installed, right?
Right.
That'd be like,
New construction would have to go with the minimum requirements for this. And we would have to adopt the ordinance that would include, like, the maximum is no more than 50% of front and side yard landscape area, and new residential developments can be lawn. Lawn limitations do not apply to small residential lots, less than 250 square feet of landscaped area. And then for new commercial, lawn area shall not exceed 20% of the total landscaped area. So those are
We
like,
can't have lawn.
yeah, just can't be the entire.
As we get closer to looking at
Yeah.
something like this, Jeff Adams is somebody I'd love to invite if he'd be open to it, to come and speak with us.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Um,
I would love to get his input. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I just want to let you all know, we're working on it. I thought we'd be a lot further along by now, but we always have so many things that come up that are unexpected, so.
Yes.
But yeah, good to see what the city is doing, and we're definitely paying close attention to that, and we'll be listening in or attending that workshop on the 26th to get the city council's perspective.
So what is your anticipated, the 26th being different from the workshop that you're holding?
So, well, we don't have anything scheduled yet for our water landscaping ordinance. The city council is looking
But they're the night of the 26th.
at the 26th.
So we've got the water thing. I just wanted to.
Oh, right, your water
That's the
thing
city
is,
council.
that's happening all in the same. Okay,
Maybe
maybe,
not the big water deal.
yeah. Oh, yeah, interesting. I wonder if they planned it that way. Or
That was probably us just not,
that was
but
just, no,
I'm not too,
That's
I'm
okay.
going with it. I'm going with the flow. I'm going with
that's
it.
what YouTube's for.
There's always, you're never gonna avoid
No, it's
another
always-
event in
yeah.
this town. Right?
They're related, but not totally
No,
contingent.
not
on
at
each
all.
other. So, yeah.
And what is your anticipated timeline for this from staff's perspective?
I think everything else going on with the land use code updates that we have in the works. Look at my calendar. It all depends on our meeting schedules. Too. So I would hope that, since we've got this started now and we've talked to the city and we've got a pretty good draft going, I would say we could notice this for the next, July 24th is a holiday. We don't have our planning commission meeting that day.
So Pioneer Day.
Yeah. It's kind of weird day. So yeah, I would say August 14th will be the very next, yep.
Speaking personally, as we look at the future land use maps, the two things that I am hoping to see in conjunction with it is water conservation and how we might define that graduation of density against
Right.
any sort of income or, you know, how we've defined ADH across different types of development.
Sure,
For me, the three of those triangulate.
yeah,
And it's hard to assess only the future land use map without understanding how could we be smarter offsetting. Knowing we have vested growth in the future land use map is intended to maintain the vested property number. It still might make it more conducive in certain areas, and I want to look at that balance against water and then also
yeah,
how we balance that against local uses or local needs.
sure.
So just, that's a personal, I don't know if anyone has any strong feelings.
oh yeah, I mean, that's always a steady
Yeah.
thing in dense urban areas, poor people are exposed to heat. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that really, because all the density is taking out all the real estate for trees and stuff,
Right,
definitely something I'd be concerned about.
okay,
And I imagine that we'll also hear from the public concerns about water and concerns about if we have density, how do we ensure it's serving our residential and workforce needs? So I think there's a benefit to the community discourse as well to however that gets balanced.
and you're specifically thinking of like the impact of increasing density, residential density, and then water demand used increased as well because of that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, cool.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the ADU discussion, and just for some context here, for those who were at our last meeting, this is the item that came before us last October, the Article 3 updates that we sent a favorable recommendation on, but was not picked up by the county commission for any number of reasons. They sort of dropped at the end of the year across the board. And so there was some discussion of this whole Article 3 update included things beyond ADU changes. Recall that there's the new state law related to interior ADUs versus exterior ADUs. So some of this was intended to bring us into compliance with state law. There also was some changes in there related to setback accommodations. So there was some discussion at the last meeting of whether or not we should peel off the ADU pieces of this and look at those again and send a recommendation forward, separate from looking at the full accessory and temporary uses. Remember, there was like the film location, temporary use and all that stuff. So that's where we left it. And then I don't know if that came up at the meeting.
Well, we didn't have a meeting in between. The county commission's last meeting was canceled.
Oh, okay.
So we
And then
haven't had a chance to bring that up, but I did
Right.
think about bringing it as a topic, a discussion.
That'd be great. That'd be
For
perfect.
this.
Yeah, because we have to put it on the agenda. I can't just randomly bring up. stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
If you would do that.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, so we haven't heard from the commission yet, because, yeah, we just haven't met.
Yeah, the last
since the
meeting would have been.
I
yeah,
know.
sure.
Mhm.
We didn't do, yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know, we don't really necessarily have to go through the red line version, but I know Jerry was really interested in being able to see it and kind of take a look at all the changes and, see if we still, if all the changes seemed good going forward, or if there was anything we were kind of second guessing. Can you let me share my screen?
Can I?
You should just go to that little, menu. Yeah, right there. We'll actually close that out. So it's, I think you close that,
This?
yeah. Now, the little carrot that's at the, yeah, the menu there, now say multiple participants can share. That should do it.
Technology, let's see.
Yeah,
You good?
yep, got it, thank you. Kind of jog our memory. We were kind of going through and dealing with a lot of just syntax and, you know, uppercase corrections for that. So everything, anything that's defined in our Article 10 as a definition should be capitalized. So those were going to be defined in our definitions, and then you have like a reduced setback here for, so the reduced setback would be 5 feet if the structure's wall height is 10 feet or less. Otherwise, structures must comply with the setbacks of the underlying zone district. I still think that's a good one.
Rather than going, it doesn't.
We don't have to all these. Yeah.
Maybe since we have a smaller number of people in attendance, and I know Jerry in particular wanted to go through
Yes.
these, maybe we hold this for the August 14th
Mhm.
meeting, and that'll give the opportunity for the commission to talk about it, and then we can go through it a little bit.
Yeah,
Does that sound good?
I like that. Yeah, because I mean, it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot, because it's not just the accessory, but we had all these temporary uses. And this is what we were thinking about, maybe just
Right.
completely holding off on and just focusing on 3.2.3 accessory.
It makes sense to separate those anyway. because they're kind of-
So
Yeah,
you guys are looking for something you want this recommendation so you guys can vote on it, right? That's kind of like,
well, I don't, you mean tonight, you think?
no, like we're trying to parse this through so that you guys, okay.
No matter what, but you guys have to vote on it first.
right, no, I
Yeah,
know.
so we will have to bring it back to planning commission as a public hearing.
What is your guys' stance on the occupancy requirements of 2-3? Like where you have to sign a covenant restricting, a deed restriction.
For the primary.
Yeah, is there any appetite to remove that?
I can't remember, we didn't really get into that, we didn't get into, we haven't talked about that. Sorry, we haven't.
From the last time we were discussing this, so that's already in land use code today. And I think it has to do with the distinction of having one building be an accessory building versus having two primary residences on the same lot, which can't exist for tax purposes. I think it has more to do with the relationship of the two structures to each other, where one is, so like you could live in your ADU while you build your house and then flip them and say, my house is now my primary residence for tax purposes and this is my accessory structure.
Well,
But you
what,
can't have two.
I guess what
primary
the
residences.
problem that I see is, let's say somebody owned a second home and doesn't live in, or like, let's say me, Moab citizen. Have a second house and I want to build an ADU. I'm not a primary resident of either of them. So now I'm not gonna build one. And ADUs are our best way of attacking affordable housing. That I think a lot of us think that way. And so it's like. And then also with the deed restriction, lowering the value of the property because it, from its full potential, because it doesn't, you can't get the available pool of buyers shrinks because of the deed restriction, because of lending. Like, I read that whole thing and I understand like, that's to me one of the main things. And I'm like, can we float that balloon or is that one sunk, you know?
We didn't dive into ADUs, we kind of got through some other things, but we haven't gotten that far, we keep having these little workshops, so we
I
don't.
mean, I hear
we
that
don't-
from, I see it like second homeowners, but also people live here that have. A second house. Now, I'm not building an ADU, I'm gonna have to, I don't live there and I'll have to lie and say I live there and then build. I don't know if that's kind of what you're saying is like for tax purposes, but then what about a second house?
Well, for tax, so the ADU can't be larger than a certain
Yeah, no,
size.
yeah.
And so you couldn't like say, oh, my 1,000-foot square cottage is my primary residence, my ADU is. the
Right,
$3,000
no,
off
I
to the
totally
side.
get that.
But for the purpose of having these two structures, they can't both be primary dwellings and be on the same lot. So I think if there's, I'm not
Could
even
they
sure.
be two rentals?
To secondary. yes.
I'm not, it's not so much in terms of rentals versus like I live here, but more this is the primary structure versus the accessory
Mhm.
structure.
Mhm.
And so I think, I'm not sure this is, I'm not sure that that is the thing that would drive property values. I think it's more of a, we may have to talk to the clerk and recorder. Like this may have to do more with the recording of the property and the plat and which is the primary structure. That's what I
So the
recall from
code-
last.
The deed restriction and the way that the land use code, one we just set up right now, it does require that one of those units one of the dwellings is occupied by the owner.
Right, and I just think that's ridiculous.
Where,
That's
so
a hat
Aaron
on a
is saying,
hat.
well, what if if your primary residence was out somewhere in Salt Lake, or whatever, and you bought a home in Moab, so that was your secondary home,
I see.
but then you wanted to build an ADU and rent that out and have your
Yeah.
so you had two rentals, so it's basically two secondary residences, but I think Tony would say, and I've heard him say this before, is that his issue with removing that requirement is that there would be the scenario of an absentee landlord situation, and that can get kind of detrimental.
We definitely have not touched on this, we barely kind of were touching on ADUs in terms of
HDHO.
HDHO,
Yeah.
right, so we haven't just,
Right.
yeah, right.
I
So-
mean, my opinion, take it as you will, I just see people, we want housing built. If there's 10% graft of like, I build an ADU so my brothers can come down and like stay in it, so be it, but if we got 90%. Filled up, great, that's more housing, and don't we want ADUs? Like, I thought ADUs is like what we wanna push, and like, it's another stumbling block, and it's like. I built one, it could have been worth $100,000, now it's only worth $50,000, cause I had to deed restrict it, and local people like, oh, I can't buy one because I can't get a loan with the deed restriction. That'd be my final.
Yeah, I'm
opinion.
gonna recommend we table this and we aim for noticing on the 14th, if you're ready with the draft, a public hearing. If the county commission supports that, let's open it up to public comment and then we can continue the discussion. And by then we'll have more input from the county commission as well. Yep, that sounds like a good, and that moves the timeline forward, so we can unlock it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I was
Yeah.
speaking more to the relationships of the units, so I get it, but,
Yeah, and Aaron, I'll definitely put that in the summary for the commission to kind of weigh in on that idea. Definitely have to move that up to the commission.
yeah, I'd love to know what the commission is. I kind of touched on this when we had our workshop at the library, like what is the outcome that the commission as a whole is biasing towards? Is it building more of these, or is it ensuring that what is built meet a very specific standard? Because I don't know that those two exist in harmony. And I'd love to know what the commission as a whole is going to gauge their strategy of this around, so that we can make a recommendation that targets a strategy and not just an opinion.
Right.
Okay, it's not 6 o'clock yet, so we can move on. I haven't heard back from Makeda. So what we're gonna do is, Steve will be for the, applications that he has to recuse on. He'll just abstain from discussion and abstain from voting. And otherwise, we will continue. So for those of you who haven't been here for a public hearing before, the way this will go is we'll have each of the items be its own public hearing. I'll invite you up here to make a comment. Staff will make a report first. We'll invite you to make a comment. You don't have to. We have notes in the packet. You're not required to, but if you'd like to, you're more than welcome. And we will then open up the public hearing for any comments on that individual application. I'm going to, it's better to keep. What I may do is open all public hearings at once, and then as people call in, if anyone has any comments about any single one of them, that way it's just, there's no confusion. Then we'll close the public hearing. And at that point, we'll have discussion and then lead to a vote on each item. Cool. All right. So with that, an ordinance to amend the land use code. Well, having said that, consider an ordinance to amend the land use code to remove the project boundary. You know what? Let's drop that one to the end since we have people here. Is that okay?
Yep.
Are we all right with that? All right, so we will move on to our, the first, I will now open a public hearing on the 5 different ADO applications that we have received for our packet this evening. The first is an alternative dwelling overlay rezone at 3207 Highway 191. The second is an alternative dwelling overlay rezone at 2231 South Highway 191. The third is an alternative dwelling overlay rezone at 1435 Powerhouse Lane. The fourth is an alternative dwelling overlay rezone at 2666 Desert Road and 2371 East Mesa Road. And then finally, an alternative dwelling overlay rezone at 2890 Spanish Valley Drive. So we will consider all of those open. Let's still do staff report for each individual one, invite the applicant to make a comment. And we'll, I think, do each of those and then we'll invite comments overall. Does that sound okay? Yeah,
Jenna will be presenting, so.
fantastic. All right.
Can you give it just a quick,
Background?
yeah, or just a
Got it.
quick, you're like,
Yep.
I got it.
So this is our second round of ADO rezones, so alternative dwelling overlays. During our first round, there was 77 units that were approved for development. And of the 150 units permitted for the program, that left 73 units possible for approval. During the second intent to apply round, each of these 5 applicants was given positive support by the commission to move forward with the full ADO rezone. One of the applicants that was supported during the ITA process has withdrawn their application in favor of developing employee housing in accordance with the land use code 3.3.2, which allows that. That applicant was proposing 4 units at Overlook and 191. All of the applicants today that are being considered had received positive response by the county commission and considered a best fit according to land use code 4.7. And with that, in total, this group of rezone applications consist of 67 of the 73 units left for approval during this round. So background on the ADO. The ADO ordinance was approved with the goal of providing local workforce housing opportunities by allowing different types of non-traditional housing on a single lot. Dwelling types could include RVs, camper vans, tents, or tiny home type dwellings. The evaluation criteria for approving or denying ADOs is described in 4.9.2 and includes items such as a preferred zoning district of MFR, multifamily residential, small lot residential, large lot residential, highway commercial, general business, and neighborhood commercial. Compatibility with existing community characteristic, existing density, or future land use designations. Historic use of the property, traffic impact, commute time, relative impact on water resources, and general overall design of the proposed development. So if approved, an applicant would record their master plan as well as the development agreement, which would define the number of units that could be developed and also includes the required deed restriction. So I can move on to the first application if you're ready.
So our first application is 3207 Highway 191.
There for you. This is the Campgrounds of America, and it's a 2.40 acre subject property located at 3207 within a highway commercial zoning district. It's bound by the KOA campground to the south, vacant rural residential property to the east, highway commercial property to the north, and Highway 191 on the west. The subject property is currently vacant and owned by KOA in the same ownership as the KOA campground to the south. The development proposes 21 dwelling sites proposed around a one-way U-shaped driveway with access to Highway 191 via gated access between the subject parcel and the neighboring KOA campground to the south. The proposed development is in compliance with all the design standards of 4.7 by meeting the required front yard, side yard, and rear yard setbacks. The proposal includes full water, sewer, and electrical hookups to all the 21 dwelling sites, as well as a 4-unit bathhouse and laundry facility, installation of which would require approval and permitting through GWSSA and the building department. The proposal includes, of course, the 21 dwelling sites on a 2.40 acre parcel of land, meeting the four minimum dwelling sites required and staying under the 40 allotted. Total lot coverage permitted for highway commercial zoning district is undefined, so any drainage needs would be determined by the county engineer and site plan approval. Individual parking stalls are included. They would be given the proper dust-free all-weather surface. And the screening would be included. It's bound on the south and the north by highway commercial, so that would exclude the south and the north from any screening requirements. The east line abuts a rural residential protected zone, so screening would be required for there. And that could be accomplished by opaque fence, vegetative buffers, or a combination of those. And additional proposed landscape includes one drought-resistant native plant for dwelling site. And that's all I have as far as the review of the application.
Okay. Does this applicant wish to come up and make a statement? All right. So let me do this. Is there anyone here to comment specifically on this application? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next open hearing. That is the EDO overlay for 2231, South Highway 191.
Okay, so 2231 Highway 191 is the Sherry Griffith River Expeditions property. It's 1.93 acres and currently home to SGRE and includes 4 existing buildings. There's a structure fronting Highway 191, which is their office, storefront, and outfitting warehouses. The building fronting Plateau houses additional warehousing space, and 2 structures at the south property line included existing dwelling and some additional covered parking and storage to the south. The development proposes 9 dwelling sites situated in the southeast corner of the property with access to Plateau Drive as well as Highway 191. An additional 28-foot wide driveway would provide direct access to each of the dwelling sites. The corner of the property, which obviously allows for ample turnaround access for residents or emergency vehicles. The application is in compliance with all of the development standards of 4.7, including their required setbacks, front, side, and rear. The application proposes 9 dwelling sites that are, the application proposes that the 9 dwelling site residents would be provided access to the shared bathhouse facility in the rear outfitting warehouse. Such facilities would be required to have a covered area with a wash, sink, and basin, portable water, and utility surface and countertop, as well as providing a potable water supply within 200 feet of any dwelling site if such communal facilities are not located within 200 feet of a dwelling site. The proposal includes the 9 dwelling sites on the minimum lot acre size of 1.93, meeting the minimum 4 and under the maximum 40. And again, like our last application, the lot coverage for highway commercial is undefined, so any drainage needs would be considered during the site plan application by our county engineer. Each dwelling site is meeting the minimum 600 feet square living space, or lot area space, and meeting the minimum 20-foot width. Individual parking spaces are provided within each dwelling site, measuring 18 by 9. Any hard surface or driveway area would be covered with durable dust-free all-weather surface. And because the property isn't bordered by a protected zone district as defined by the land use code, screening would not be required here. And again, proposed landscape on the property would include 1 tree or shrub per dwelling site.
Did you want to make a comment? All right. Is there anyone here to make a comment specifically about this application? All right, we'll move on to our third application. This is at 1435 Powerhouse Lane.
I'm gonna zoom way in so you can kind of see. So located at 1435 Powerhouse Lane, this 8.19 acre property straddles both sides of Powerhouse Lane with a split of 6.37 acres to the north and 1.82 acres to the, 6.37 acres to the south of Powerhouse Lane and 1.82 acres to the north. The subject property is within an RR zoning district adjacent to the city of Moab and vacant property to the north and south. The city's 24 lot Mill Creek Village PUD is situated along Powerhouse Lane, along with a few single family dwellings. And the city's 93 unit Abbey subdivision is also forthcoming, which will be fronting on Mill Creek Drive and Powerhouse Lane. The development proposes 11 RV sites situated along Powerhouse Drive on the west side of the property, and additionally would include a shared amenity structure on the east side of the property. The development meets the required setbacks for the RR zoning district with 25 feet in the front, 15 side, and 20 rear. It includes a proposal for full water, sewer, and electrical hookups, eliminating the need for the shared bathhouse. Of course, it meets the minimum 4 for the ADO dwelling sites and under the maximum 40 allowed. The lot coverage for the property based on the proposed dwelling sites is 2.3%, which is well below the maximum 25% allowed for the rural residential zoning district. So drainage is probably not required for lot coverage at least. Each dwelling site does meet the required 600 square foot minimum and the minimum 20-foot width, and also setback of minimum 10 feet from any other dwelling on the property. Individual parking spaces are provided, and an internal driveway serves all of the units and provides direct access. The development is bound on all sides by land zoned rural residential. So as such, those screening requirements would be required to be met on the north, west, and then also for the shared amenity structure on the far east as well. Additionally, regarding landscaping, there is a ton of landscaping on the property, so it will probably cover the requirements for the landscaping element. I know I have for that application.
You want to make a comment? All right.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for continuing to push forward these ADO projects. It's such an important step, and just really thankful to all of you for making it happen. On this project in particular, the reasons that we feel that this is a great site for this project is firstly for pedestrian access. This location is easily bikeable into town. And it's part of a growing residential node that will hopefully eventually have public transportation as well for pedestrians on foot. It's already a very busy road with its proximity to the Mill Creek Trailhead. So it's not like this is going to be adding a great deal of additional traffic because the road is already heavily trafficked. It's adjacent to a high density residential node with the Abbey development that's going in, the existing desert, can't remember what it's called, but the existing single family project nearby. And then you've also got Cinema Court in the area. There's just a lot of high density housing happening in this area. And there potentially could be future commercial nodes that support these neighborhoods with the way that the city property is zoned just down the street. Also, as Jenna mentioned, less than 3% of the parcel would be covered with development, so it's as light of a touch as possible on this piece of property. A final point to make is that this owner originally had a second home designed and permitted for this property. So they made the conscious decision to walk away from their second home plans in order to put in this ADO project. So this to me is the perfect kind of example where somebody is coming to the table and saying, I want to build housing. So I'm hopeful that we will take the opportunity. I said that was my final point. One more. I made this point to the commission as well, that a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. And I know that this will use up a lot of the allowability of the sunset clause for this ADO, but it's somebody that's ready now, willing to build, and can put these housing units on the ground very quickly. Thank you.
Is anybody here to speak at the public hearing specifically on this project? You're welcome to come up to the front, and if you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record.
Sure.
And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set a timer for 3 minutes, and the alarm will go off when 3 minutes are done.
I have a lot to say, and I've lived in Moab for 4 years, and
Would you mind stating?
I
your
would
name?
love to have more than 3 minutes is what I'd like to say at first.
Well, there'll be a public hearing at the county commission as well, and an opportunity to submit written comment. And 3 minutes is what we tend to keep our comments at for our public
I
hearing.
understand.
So I am gonna maintain that just for the sake of consistency, but there'll be an opportunity to submit written comment and then also another public hearing at the county commission.
Okay, I usually do extensive written comments, and I think my comments would take about 5 minutes.
Okay,
And I think there's very few people here, but if you'd like me to keep it to 3,
just for the sake of consistency, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I think you're just gonna have to cut me off then.
Okay, well, the alarm will go off at 3 minutes. So if you
Okay.
wanna just state your name, I'll hit start as soon as
Okay,
you're done.
Daniel Kent.
Okay.
And I appreciate you guys being here and doing what you do for the city and the county, and that you've spent countless hours working out the issues that we're all dealing with, and I really appreciate you willing to bring the time into this. I also appreciate that you're looking at dealing with the housing situation that Moab has for mostly workforce housing. Personally, I'm not that into the whole thing because it seems like there's been a lot of failure. Some of my best friends, Melissa Schmadick, who started the Moab Folk Festival, for example, left town because of a poorly planned and decided unit that was hastily put up that totally covered her yard with a shadow of it. And I think that you guys are in a difficult situation because people will always try to find a way around these things, around any limitation you put in place. Problem is that so many people are getting around these limitations that I'm not a big fan of working towards this. And I'm also not a big fan because the motel industry is a lot of what's driving this. And I would say, what do we want? Do we want quality or do we want quantity of humans in this town? And I don't think that the 2 units you first showed were both on the highway. Not a bad choice for trailer parks, RV parks. Mouth of the Canyon, the most important place in the entire county to protect for wildlife reasons and for our own spiritual escape of the most beautiful, life-giving place in the entire county, the biggest creek that we have access to. Really bad place for it. And I want to show you that you have already created a bunch of housing coming up now. We've got that giant development just down from here. I used to live, by the way, in Powerhouse Trailer Court, and it was gotten rid of basically. We tried to buy it and put in small housing, real houses, natural houses, but we lost it because we didn't have enough support from the city and the county to fight a lawsuit that was brought by the man who used to own the giant development that's happening down the block. He lost that because it was a frivolous lawsuit, but we lost the thing because even though we had a loan from the state to buy it, it was under duress and they couldn't support us. So there was a trailer court. It was a non-conforming use. The city got rid of it. And now we're proposing another one. It seems ridiculous to me. It seems like going backwards. And it seems like, if anything, we should stack development. So it goes into the mouth of the canyon, reducing our impact. It's WSA, Wilderness Study Area. And that is a high priority place to protect in its natural state. Not only that, I'm a wildlife biologist. The very narrow corridor coming into town right there is maybe one of the most important places to protect for wildlife. These trailers right overlooking that whole zone is totally going to impact wildlife. There's no escaping that. Right now, it's very peaceful. That's going to almost obliterate what little value it is as a travel corridor for a lot of wildlife. And I'm mostly talking larger sentient mammals, predators. Again, I lived there 17 years. And yeah, it was great to be able to walk right out your door and go up the canyon. That's a great value of that. However, it's one of the most bouncy places in the whole valley. So when you make noise there, like a trailer park's going to do, you're going to totally destroy that silence.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here who wants to make a comment specifically on this application? Come on up. If you wouldn't mind stating your name before I hit start, and then we'll do 3 minutes.
Christopher Conway.
Okay.
Thank you. I've been a Grand County resident for 25 years or so. I served on the county council back in 2009 to 12. I'm the caretaker right now of 1389 Powerhouse Lane, and I have a loose relationship with Matt where I caretake his property and manage the irrigation, things like that. But Matt doesn't have a real active role in the property, but I'm there often. I think it's a poor idea. If I may speak also to those first 2 ideas, I thought both those were great ideas. Those are like the place, those are like the right places, the right situations to put these things. This, I think, is a poor place. If I may speak to the points that were made earlier, easy pedestrian access to town. I think this is not easy pedestrian access to town. It's a 3-mile walk to town. It's hot in the summertime, it's cold in the wintertime. It's not good access to the downtown working districts. Busy road it was pointed out that this isn't going to add any traffic to a busy road. Again, maybe in the springtime, but not now, not on a hot summer day. There's no traffic up there. If you have 11 units, people coming and going, it's going to be more traffic in the wintertime, right? There's very light traffic on Powerhouse Lane in the wintertime. You add 11 residents, you're going to increase traffic tremendously. Yes, it is near other high density housing, nearby, but really this whole area here, including 1339, 1389, 1435, is basically a private park right now. So like the existing neighborhood quality, that's a park. There's wildlife like Danny was saying, it's quiet. To put a trailer court in there, that's completely goes against the existing neighborhood quality. Less than 3% of the acreage would be affected. Well, yeah, but it's like extremely steep terrain there to the south there. It's unusable. It's just steep, rocky terrain. I guess you could bridge across the creek and use that little bit that's on the north side of the creek, but anyway. The owner is walking away from their second home opportunity. I don't believe that the Monahans are altruists. I don't think they're like, I just don't believe that they're like, we'll give up our second home for this trailer park. No, there's other reasons why they're not building their second home. And this is like trying to sell the property. They're trying to get this ADO so they can sell the property. I believe. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I think it's a bad idea. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this particular application? Crystal is online.
Hello. Hello, can you see me?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start the timer once you state your full name for the record, okay?
Okay, my name is Crystal Music. I've lived in the Moab area for maybe 10 years. I personally think it's a great idea. RV owners, tiny homes deserve just as much space and land as a private homeowner. There's no reason why they shouldn't be discriminated against. Actually, I don't live that far down the road from this place. I can walk my bicycle to town. There's also the shuttle service now that I utilize to town. So I have easy access to town. I don't find it a problem. I think the homeowners in the area, it's a classic example of Moab, not in my backyard. It's a classic example of NIMBY. We can house how many people in this pretty small acreage of land? Powerhouse Lane is noisy anyways. I mean, you have a lot of tourists going down that road to Mill Creek. Community rebuilds, I believe, in that same little area is building affordable housing. What's wrong with more affordable housing? We can't, it's not like directly on Mill Creek. We have protected space down the road. But we got to do something. So I support this idea. Thank you.
Seeing none, we-
So this quarter of the Seven Desert Road, this will span 2 vacant properties, totaling 1.6 acres of large lot. Properties found by Sage Component Development, Designer West, as well as company. Property owners primarily. To the south, north, and east exist mainly single family dwellings, large lot residential. The proposed development is in compliance with all of the development standards. By meeting the development envelope requirement 25 feet per yard, 10.5 and 20 meters. The proposal includes sewer, water, and electrical infrastructure, including 19 dwelling sites, including the kitchen. The lot coverage permitted for zoning district. Proposal includes lot coverage up to 15. And while each dwelling site meets the 600 foot and 2045 minimum as well. Individual cooking costs are required and met at 18 feet on. And then internal driveway for all the units provides for. The internal driveway was originally slated to enter off of Desert Road, but per the recommendation of Conservation 5 period, they prefer to see it off of Mesa Drive. And so the application was removed and run by the supervisor. And property down by the west, highway completed property, including the property line between requirements. The rear property line adjacent to the residence on the west will however require screening through sighting and layout, open fences, and vegetative. Program taken on the property would include photo pockets, with one rather distributed bush. This is a bit of rework layout from the original type of plan, but it has been approved by the supervisor. And you actually offer me some. So, 20-foot typical pavement. Yeah.
All those. You would like to see something that. the reason we- we would like to see. So we have had. What we would like to present. And also. Like. To, having the development for, for being, like you said, traditionally, it's still home for. Station, and a few other different. And the commission was feeling like, well, it wasn't, they weren't included very much. Depending on methodology is committed to in development agreement. And it wouldn't be in question. If this is something that they will look at. That was the-
Pretty, pretty convincing.
Water, which is kind of a bit of a concern, but purple. Wall.
Is there anyone else?
on to the next one. Next up, I don't think it's work. Are you able to stay online for stuff, or if not, no. I think maybe you could stay on for another 30 or 40 minutes. I'll let you ready to vote, but it's fine. Oh, never mind. So we need to start to- That sounds great. Yeah, sometimes it's the thing where people talk about. So I don't talk about it either. Somebody else needs to- It's a good reminder. We'll move on to our next application. Spanish Village Way. And I think actually, having the option. Towards Jen.
This is the 2 acres, the rural residential. Currently, the location of the dwelling is found. This application proposes 7 ADA dwelling sites. Recommendation of the commission during the ITA phase. Would also, like the last application, be developed as an RV traditionally built for pre-manufactured homes. The site is also designed with community pavilion that would have amenities such as additional stores, outside kitchen, and laundry facilities. While adjacent property is also zoned for residential, the 2012 and 2030 general plan identifies this area as a rural central node in regards to future development for neighborhood retail, local commercial, local tourism, and increased residential density to 3.2 units per acre. Additionally, we could take away from the future land use plan workshop, as well as input provided by the land use steering committee, would identify this area as an ideal location for residential density. This application again does meet all requirements of 0.9 development standards by meeting required development and it also includes water and electricity, as well as eliminating the need for shared facilities. Because that coverage for 12% as defined by land use code, including the dwelling site and proposed structure, and that is well under the 35% allowance. Dwelling site all meet the minimum of 600 to 100 square foot dwelling site as requirement and the minimum. The internal driveway serves all of the units and provides direct access to the dwelling site. Each individual parking and dwelling site to be improved to the level of. And regarding screening, the development was found in the south side of the rural residential, and it would be required to include screening of open fences within the community. And of course, landscaping each like treatment. And like the last application would be
There's no requirement. Anyone here to make a comment? Anyone else who's here to make a comment? to this particular topic? Any of these applications? Sticking around. Generally, we don't do back and forth with superintendent, occasionally a member of the city. So if you love, if we want to stay, great, but it's no requirement. The way that this works is we'll have discussions generally to make sure we understand these applications and see. Wait for a motion on the table for each of these items before there's any substantive discussion, like whether something thinks they need to look at something and. Yeah, and doing it. Okay. Is that any better? Somewhat? Are there any for staff or any person who's going to be?
All house made. What's the square footage of the RV? I can, I think I see the site, you know, how big the RV would be.
The only.
The one that didn't get.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Property has a lot. You're the guy, but that's what. Any other questions?
Anyone is welcome to the motion on the table. The motion. Written. Need to have that. So let me quickly, what we've done is added the county commission. We put that as- There are seven are these criteria that are listed for these generator applications. They include, is located in a district, so those are multi-family residential, large lot residential, highway commercial, general business, commercial. So there's an application. Compatibility with characteristics. That we want to land. Historic use. Including historic use for multiple zones. Traffic impacts, as in videos should be limited to parcels with main direction and on the material of the street for the uniform transportation master plan. And new time, considering location of jobs. The multimodal transportation option. Water is a large lots. Overall design. Which can be visual justification, but we do want to make sure that we are justifying our decision against this criteria. Because we're holding basis in which we have a commission. Basically, pulling all these to
Think it in to. Is. Feeling to me,
this is a favorable favorable recommendation. To accept community characteristics, it's in line with surrounding uses and its impact or lack of impact. Yes. Karen, give us your photo.
I was loud.
However. You know, always.
Yeah, I think, in this discussion carried throughout this entire meeting, finding the balance of pieces with areas you want to come here, but areas you have more of a residential feel, if you can, residency and so forth. Like I went out here and while it's so I think you can find the balance. People will make
Hey, $100. 25. For what he makes a month, and he's having to provide his own RV. You know, I've seen, you know, kind of the online range of how much he's spending to keep the players and charging the market rate. I think we need to put these. See that.
any other comments related to this motion? In line. And favor. Or
Stated national. Two.
2, 3, located at 2231 Highway 191. I kind of like this proposal. I think it's wonderful for someone to step up and actually offer employee housing on their own property. Good location. It's highway commercial. It's on Highway 191. Seems to be compatible with what's around it. You know, if it's gonna bother anybody, it's gonna bother the business that it's at, but I don't think it will. So I think it's a good project.
all right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, it's a second by Aaron. I noticed there's a comment in the chat. I don't know what that is in relation to. And we've ended our public hearing, but I just want to make sure that's not Makeda. Is this Makeda? Was this on? I'm sorry, I didn't know which, no. Okay, so we'll move on. Any additional comments about this particular application? Okay, so just to restate, and I'm sorry, this was a motion by OB. Did you second this? Second by Aaron. So this is for 2231 Highway 191. OB moves to send a favorable recommendation for the ADO rezone. Based off of its location, particularly in a preferred zone, its relative impact on traffic, its compatibility with surroundings, and in addition to that, supporting employee housing being on site. With that, we'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
That is 5 in favor, unanimous for those in attendance. Okay. So we will move on to, this is the Powerhouse Lane one. 1435 Powerhouse Lane. Were there any questions to clarify with staff or any discussion related to clarify the application itself?
I'm not sure staff can answer this. My only concern, I think, with this project is the possibility of wildlife. And so really the question is, I look at this and I've got Powerhouse Lane and I've got something steep on this side. Then I have the project that's well screened off actually from Powerhouse Lane from going out there today. And I didn't walk them through, there's an easement that is for irrigation. Then there's Mill Creek. I'm wondering about the topography that's out further. And the reason I am is it real narrow or is it reasonably wide? Because if it was real narrow, I might worry about wildlife. I can't tell fully from the map that you brought up, but it looks like there's a fair amount of room over there on that side for wildlife. That's it'll be probably a bit of concern, but I don't know that it's very dominant. I can't tell. You may not be able to tell from the map either, and I.
Yeah, and I couldn't confirm for you.
Yeah.
I think part of the concern too is like, I'm not able to make a judgment of what is enough. Is it 20 feet, 5, 400, like,
I feel more comfortable with 400
yeah,
than
for
5.
sure.
Otherwise, I'm not concerned about the traffic, but that's for later discussion.
I would
This be
say
one concern.
I'd be interested in whoever makes a motion, if there were to be a favorable motion, we could recommend that. Or even recommend a requirement or recommend follow-up with some sort of like structural design for this particular project, which I think could remove some of the concern related to aesthetics, which I mean, on a personal note, not even specific to this project, I'm less and less inclined to deny housing based off of aesthetics personally. I think people live in vans in our parks, families live in cars. They are not worried about the aesthetics of their car. That's a hard one, but gosh. So I think if anyone were to make a motion, we could potentially consider making a recommendation towards the county commission if they might want to inquire about that.
With the motion.
With the motion.
Well, that wasn't, he was talking about wildlife.
Oh, I know, I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
adding an additional comment related to just how.
I would love them to take a look at.
We can,
Wildlife
I would
also.
imagine, I mean, there's all those, there is a ton of data regarding wildlife and wildlife movements. I don't know if they have any of these town deer collars, but it's feasible. I mean, I do know that they definitely move out of that Walker property and over up to Powerhouse, and I don't know exactly where they're going, if they're just going back and forth. I don't know if Danny knows that, back and forth between Walker and there is a lot of wildlife right there.
So we might want to include something like that in the motion as well.
Right.
To have a follow-up in the staff report for that.
Yeah, we can pull that.
Can you receive input from either myself or Dan at this?
So generally, we don't do back and forth unless you have some like specific evidence that we could use to assess this. What I would recommend is it's something we would include in a motion if we thought it was relevant. And then that could be a follow-up staff could make prior to this going to the county commission. That way we make sure that what is coming before the planning commission is research and validated.
And maybe if you guys would make, when you make comment to the county commission, if you could just put if you have anecdotal, but if you also have, you know, if you have the site for the GPS, yeah. That'd be-
Geophysical
Yes,
stuff.
thank you, that'd be great, yeah, that's.
And I thank you for understanding. I mean, part of keeping the public process consistent also allows for, if there is ever a challenge on the decision made or any sort of public record, it just allows us to be as unbiased and consistent as possible, I think helps the whole system. So I do appreciate your understanding. Thank
I
you.
totally understand the intent, whole intent of providing more housing, is understood.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I took the pause after the wildlife comment, the long pauses.
Oh, no, I think that was,
So
I think that was,
definitely-
okay, when I asked for the size of the housing, I was just saying, well, there's 11 of these times 192 square feet of housing. Now, the lots may have, extra cars and stuff, but it's not like it's a fairly big project in terms of the number of units, but there's a lot of square footage covered at this point out there, but I am concerned about the wildlife. It's pretty narrow there, as far as I can tell.
Well, if someone wanted to make a motion, and any motion can be amended as well. It sounds like there might be some question to. Well, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I'll move
Give
to
us-
send a favorable recommendation to approve the alternative dwelling overlay rezone and associated master plan for Grand County parcel number 02-008-0155, located at 1435 Powerhouse Lane. I think the reasons would be one of my ones, it fits the zoning. And I think there's been a historical use, of people camping out at Powerhouse Lane. I probably have illegally camped out there a few times, and commute time is a 3-minute bike ride into town. Definitely is close to a lot of jobs. That being said, I don't want to sink a project because of,
Well, let's start with this motion, and if we want to
Yeah.
add amendments to it, we can.
Okay.
So we have a motion to send a favorable recommendation by Aaron, based off of, I actually don't know that zoning fits into because that's still RR stuff.
oh, that
But
is,
for historic use
Well,
and commute time, right?
sorry.
I don't know where it's.
I feel like it fits the character of the city zoning next to it.
Hmm.
That's what I would say, like we're having the density near it, so,
Compatibility.
yeah, compatible.
Okay, so based off of compatibility with surrounding usage, historic uses on or near the site and commute time to jobs and multimodal traffic. Okay, is there a second? And a reminder that Steve is recusing, so Makeda, if you are available to vote on this one, this is the one we need you for. Okay, so is there a second for Aaron's motion to send a favorable recommendation? I'll provide a second. I will second this. Do you have any additional comments you wanted to make?
I mean, I definitely hear the concern. I also think that, quality humans are all humans, and it doesn't matter what type of living they live in. I think this one is like, a grapes. Not a non-highway place to live.
I'm just acknowledging that, Makeda, I see your comment, so that's fine. Yeah, I'll add, I understand it's hard when parts of our community change, and especially when those places are very well loved. I think there are wonderful people, families, retirees, children, employees, volunteers, coaches, any number of people who are seeking housing and cannot find housing in our community. And I do think that those people are quality people, and I understand, the way we talk about these projects is very emotional, but I personally for all of the reasons Aaron has stated, support this project, but I also feel as though people live in different types of homes, particularly in a community like ours, and people should be allowed to live in beautiful places with their families and not be forced to live by a highway simply because that's all they can afford. And I think it's wonderful to see a balance of projects and a balance of places come out of this project. I also think I would like to see the adaptability of these projects to their areas and surrounding landscapes also be somewhat flexible. So I'd like to make a motion to amend to cover Aaron's motion, but to amend to include that an application to the county commission include, if nothing else, a statement on impact to wildlife patterns in the area, as well as to include in our recommendation, a recommendation that the commission seek an agreement from this developer to design the units to be amenable to their surroundings. So.
Oh, is that, I would
That's a
second
motion.
that.
Okay, so we would have a amendment to include, add that onto Aaron's original motion, made by me, seconded by OB. I made my comment. Did you want to add a comment?
Only that I agree with almost everything you said, for no, not for a change. My concern has been with HDHO, et cetera. Now, of course, I really like this alternative dwelling overlay because we can have tiny houses and we can have trailers. People need a roof over their head. It's 192 feet. It's a roof over your head, and that's very important. So I actually like seeing this. Of course, trailers were a historical use, as Dan non-conforming, a historical use. When I first saw them go away, I thought, oh my God, there goes housing for people going away. Very nice to see that you hook up to the sewer system, though. The one thing those trailers might have contributed was the telephone count, and Mill Creek kind of started in that area where there were septics, and there might have been a septic or two leaking. Very important for the wildlife. So I appreciate this motion a great deal.
Can I do that? Okay. Any other, so we now have an amended motion on the table, and the way we'll do this is we'll vote on the amended motion when we're ready. If that passes, we'll move on. If not, we'll return to the original motion without the amendment. Are there any other, Makeda, did you have anything you wanted to contribute? Otherwise, I might call the question on putting that amended motion on the table. Motion to amend on the table, and then we'll vote on it. Okay, so basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna vote on whether to amend the original motion or not. So all in favor of amending Aaron's original motion to include a requirement that the application include a statement on impact to wildlife, and as well as to recommend to the applicant that they agree to a development agreement to construct the housing in a way that's amenable to its surroundings. So all in favor of amending the motion to include those two recommendations or requirements? Favor?
Yes.
Yes, okay, 4 in favor, 1 abstention. I'm gonna try and repeat this back one more time. Any other comments, any other discussion that anyone wants to
Now,
add?
just ask, just for clarity, so when you say amenable to the surrounding, that's kind of subjective. Are you hoping that they figure it out and decide?
And I
or-
intentionally made it a recommendation. I don't think it should be a requirement in of itself from us. But I would highly recommend that the applicant consider that and that the county commission consider that in their discussion.
So by way of inclusion of the statement in the RB, but traditionally built stick built houses like the other one.
Amenable to their surroundings, is- yes, that's
design.
that's gonna be.
I assume that means amenable might be that what the project they have is amenable to it, but you want some explanation of how it is. Is that roughly right?
Yes, I can remake my motion if it'd be helpful, and that way we can be clear. So a motion to include a statement on wildlife impact, as well as to recommend to the developer that they construct tiny homes or stick frame homes as opposed to traditional RVs. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So maybe let's vote on that again, if there's a second. Is there a second to that changed motion? Or OB, would you like to see not the stick frame part? You can come in with your own.
You said it's a recommendation if they do that. I'm okay with that then. I'm gonna guess the commission will make some decision and the developer will.
I guess whenever you make a stick-built house, it's more permanent. It's a bell that's harder to unring. That's my only thing with it. And it's like, you know,
Well, if they're tiny homes though, that are on
They can be great chassis.
they can be on a chassis.
yeah.
My concern would be whatever the cost of these houses are gonna be.
Yeah.
You know, you could replace my motion just to have a statement on wildlife now that Trish has captured our conversation around housing. I don't think it needs to be in the motion. So if you'd like to, we can throw in another one. It's the Roberts rules gives us all the power.
Well,
Feel free to do so, by the way.
I would, I can't probably quote your motion exactly, but I would like the motion probably without a recommendation of what the housing looks like.
So you would amend the original motion. You would put forth an alternative motion to amend
Yes,
to include only an impact on wildlife.
and
patterns.
with impact on wildlife.
I will second your motion. Okay, so we have an alternative motion to amend Aaron's motion. Steve is having a great time.
Keep your mouth shut, Steve. Just listen.
Such a silly suit, these 18th century discussion laws. An alternative motion to amend to include that the developer include a statement of impact to wildlife in their application before it comes to the county commission. So made by OB, seconded by Emily. So this is removing the stick frame home or the tiny home recommendation. So all in favor on this motion to alternative motion to amend, say aye. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Let's go back and state Aaron's amended motion. A motion to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission for the ADO application at 1435 Powerhouse Lane, made by Aaron, seconded by Emily, based off of the character of its surroundings, the historic use of the property, and the commute time to jobs and multimodal traffic nodes, with an additional requirement that the developer include a statement of impact to wildlife to the county commission. Okay, any additional comments around this motion? If not, we'll vote on this motion. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. All right, that's 4 opposed, all abstaining is 1 with Steve abstaining. Thank you, Makeda. If you need to drop, I think, are you abstaining for 1 more?
Yeah.
Oh, Makeda, stay on for 1 more if you don't mind. 1 more, okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to our 4th application. This is the Desert Road and Mesa Road. ADO. Any questions for staff or discussion to clarify the application? Seeing none, if anyone would like to make a motion, you may do so.
Sure, I'll move to send a favorable recommendation to approve the alternative flowing overlay rezone and associated master plan for Grand County parcel 02-0021-0142 to 2666 Desert Road in Moab, Utah, and 02-0021-0143 2371 East Mesa Road in Moab, Utah.
Do you want to give a
Oh,
justification?
yeah, this one,
Quick on the draw.
yeah. Some of the arguments for, being close to the highway corridor was, one of mine, and then that was, you were saying it was also on the future, or we were looking at it for a future land use, map. I know we haven't passed that, but that was one of our node areas we're looking, and, the overall design of the proposed development, I really liked seeing, this was our first tiny home one that we've seen, although there's another one tonight, but I kind of was excited to see those ones as well. That they wanted to do.
And OB, did you still want to second that motion?
Yes,
Okay, so we have a motion by Aaron to send a favorable recommendation for 2666 Desert Road and 2371 East Mesa Road based off its proximity to the highway corridor, its compatibility with future land use map and surrounding nodes, and the overall design of the proposed development. Any additional discussion or comments? Are we ready to call the question? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all abstaining. So that's 4 in favor, 1 abstained. Now I think Makeda, you're free to draw. So thank you so much. Have a great night, or stay on if you want, but no pressure. Okay, we'll move on to 2890 Spanish Valley Drive. Any comments?
Oh, yeah, good.
Or would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. If I can get it back up again. Let me see if I can get this window closed down. Here we go. I move to send a favorable recommendation to approve the alternative dwelling overlay rezone associated master plan for Grand County parcel number 02-0022-0033 located at 2890 Spanish Valley Drive.
Do you want to give justification?
Oh, my goodness. That I have to go back and look at my
Compatibility.
notes here. Yeah, it's got, it's a small project. It only has 7 homes. They're gonna be traditional homes or tiny homes. It's on a 2-acre parcel, and I think it's a good project in terms of well, I guess I'll have to look at more notes here. But I liked it when I first saw it. Meet times seem to be pretty good. It looks like it doesn't have a kind of neighborhood people who are real upset with it at all, and it seems to be reasonably compatible therefore with where it's at.
All right, so motion by OB to send a favorable recommendation for 2890 Spanish Valley Drive, based off the fact that it is a small project, particularly with traditional or homes or tiny homes. The size of the parcel is compatible to it at 2 acres. Commute times to multimodal transportation or jobs, as well as compatibility with surroundings. Any second? Seconded by Aaron. Any additional comment or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. And Makeda has dropped, so that is 4 in favor, which is unanimous. All right. Thank you all so much for coming and making comments, as well as for coming and talking to us about your applications. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right. We have one more public hearing. If you all want to talk about buffer zones, stay tuned. Otherwise, we'll give everyone a minute or two to head out, and then we'll go ahead and turn over. Yeah. Okay.
It's good seeing you, Chris.
Okay. So it is 6:21. We will now move on to the agenda item that we had tabled. Consider an ordinance to amend the land use code to remove the project boundary buffer requirement. We'll begin with staff reports, move on to public hearing, and then have discussion. So, Jenna. That's me. Oh, that's you. Yeah. All right.
Going back to me, so this is something we've tagged a while back. It's come up several times when we have subdivision applications. And it just doesn't seem to be something that's super relevant to our lay of the land anymore. So I'll just read some of the justification here in the ordinance. The requirement to provide an additional 20 feet or more buffer for residential development, specifically for affordable housing, is unnecessary and in some cases prohibits affordable housing to be developed in areas where infill is appropriate and encouraged. We have setbacks for a reason. So, you know, our required setbacks already create like 20 feet essentially between homes, because it's 10 feet on each side is the minimum. Sometimes they're even deeper. So I think the reason that this was originally in our land use code, I'll just bring up the actual amendment here. I think it was back when there was a lot more big open land that wasn't subdivided yet. And it was kind of this idea that, if a subdivision was gonna go in next to an existing subdivision, that there should be this 20-foot buffer to kind of protect the existing subdivision. I just feel like when you look at our parcel map these days, there aren't a ton of big, huge parcels, tracts of land that are gonna be subdivided, except for kind of like out in the here, like out here, next to the golf course, that, you know, potential something going in there. But I mean, there's a lot of subdivisions that we've already approved from decades ago, and they're all established at this point. I mean, these big tracts of land here are preserved in perpetuity for ag. When you look at, down here, even like, there's some areas that have potential for subdivisions, but there's already high density, and it just kind of, to us as planners, it kind of makes the pattern of land being divided and having these weird buffers that go all the way around, it just doesn't seem to work very well. And so one of the reasons this is also being brought up is, for specifically for infill opportunities, like when Community Rebuild comes to us with an idea for what they're kind of working on, what they've been wanting to do, and they're trying to bring this more to the forefront, is actually reaching out to property owners that have trailers on their properties, maybe dilapidated trailers, and giving them an incentive to replace their trailer and build a tiny community rebuilds home. It's a great idea, but a lot of times those parcels, in order for them to make that work, they want to be able to subdivide a small lot and make it even smaller, but in a zone that's already like this, like higher density. So there's areas where they've been looking at, that they've targeted, where there's dilapidated trailers, and they're looking at possibility of being able to subdivide down. But if you have a project boundary buffer of an additional 20 feet, it just makes it impossible to provide that kind of opportunity. So
So is the additional 20 feet on top of the setback? Or is that just?
I don't think so. It's
Okay,
no,
it's just
it's
instead of
not.
a 10-foot setback.
It would be
it's
like
now
another
20 foot.
20, but for all the way around a subdivision, which for a larger subdivision, I could see that maybe
Right,
being
right,
where it would make sense, but for a small infill, in our code, it doesn't differentiate. It just says any subdivision, any residential development has to have this project boundary buffer. So, but yeah, we're proposing to remove it. And
So it's also more for consistency,
yeah,
right?
yes.
These are the setbacks.
Yeah, these are the
Right.
setbacks. Let's just follow our setbacks.
So I guess the question I would have is,
Sorry, really quick, let's do staff report and then do public
Sorry,
hearing, just in case, just
Sorry,
to say
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that's okay. I am technically, are you comfortable with me jumping in with it's 6:26, I will now open this public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment during this public hearing on this? And the proposal to remove the buffer requirement for residential development? All right.
I'm in full support of this proposal. Every foot counts when you're trying to increase density. So thank you for continuing to find things in the code that are barriers.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here who'd like to make a comment? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and turn to OB for a question.
so, I mean, my question is, of course, we don't know the acreage of any of these, but and maybe there's already something in the code to help do it. Let's say we're gonna have a big multifamily project and it's gonna be 3 stories.
So here's where.
Do we
here's
have
where
a way
that-
to get at that?
Our setbacks can be set however deep you want to go for multifamily zoning. And so that will be a conversation that we have when we start to look at adopting multifamily residential zoning districts, which,
When we get rid of it here, will we have nothing in the interim?
right, but, well, true, but, well, we don't. Okay, so this is for subdivisions. For multifamily, it's one lot with one or multiple buildings, but you're basically looking at our setbacks for multifamily, which we have not very much at all. We don't have, so let's see. Right now, MFR, your setbacks for MFR, and it's only, MFR is 8 units per acre. That's the max that we allow right now. There's probably 2 or 3 areas in,
So when we go to
Have
these
that.
higher maxes, then we'll also have setbacks.
we should be looking very carefully at setting our setbacks. However deep you want to go in order to provide some kind of a buffer.
Yeah.
That's what setbacks are for.
Right.
And so, right now, like what I'm trying to say, I guess with multifamily is anywhere where we have multifamily, there's not a lot left. I mean, it's pretty much built out. And it's, yeah. So anyway.
It was just my worst case
Yes,
scenario.
definitely.
Thinking about it, okay.
Yeah, all these areas that are zoned with MFR 8, they're all subdivided at this point.
Any other questions for staff?
So you gave the example of community rebuilds being a developer who runs into the issue of these additional buffers inhibiting, a project from going forward. So we're not creating any more housing and affordable housing like that. Is there any examples that you've seen of this killing a project, for lack of a better phrase? Is there like a size subdivision? Is that what I'm getting at is like, would there be some benefit to keep a buffer if there's going to be a subdivision of a certain size or larger? And not to say that that's what I want, but just exploring those sorts of
Right.
options, because I could see that being pretty jarring if there's a huge open space and a huge subdivision comes in and goes right up to that setback,
Right.
which may only be 20 feet, but multiply that by 100 new homes on,
Right. Yeah. I
that's a
mean, there's
substantial
could be some
intrusion.
consideration for that. Right, so maybe modifying the language so that there's some kind of a threshold, like a certain size subdivision would still require a buffer.
Potential, I don't even know if that's needed, if there's any scenarios like that, but I'm just curious, like. What would be driving the change, everything that would be driving it?
I think it's mainly the fact that now where we're at with subdividing is we're looking at smaller and smaller lots, and there's not a ton of those larger subdivisions that are gonna take place. The only one I can really think of is this up here in this area.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So we have just speaking about multifamily residential, we have the fencing requirement between multifamily or commercial or neighboring residential. Is it possible to potentially include the requirement of if you're in multifamily, if your height goes over a certain time, then you have to have the same distance of setback, like if it's 30, you then have to
That's
have
what
a
the
30 foot?
language thing says now.
Okay.
It says 20 feet but that's only for, oh no, that is for, okay, so 20 feet. Oh, yeah, it is. So it calls out, it's weird. It actually calls out affordable housing, so. As though it's kind of discriminatory, like, it's like, okay, if you're in affordable housing development, then you need to provide this extra big buffer around you. Which I think,
Contrary, to, like,
it's very
we
strange.
don't want your type here.
Yeah.
right.
If we get far enough away, we're okay.
So I would say, but this is the language you're talking about though, Jenna, is the project boundary, no, here it is, it's at the end here. The project boundary buffer on each edge shall be 20 feet or the proposed building height, whichever is greater. So when we get around to adopting multifamily residential zoning, we can include that into our setbacks, or some kind of language that has to do with setbacks. But like right now, we just don't have multifamily development going in. There's no opportunities for that.
And those remaining larger parcels don't have the density to support really small lots, which means they would all be subdivided on the fairly larger lots anyway, quarter acre lots or more. In which case the buffer would be unnecessary anyway.
These are all gonna be,
So-
yeah, I mean, with this, if it's a PUD, they're gonna have different density things going on, but
But with the PUD, you can
Still.
structure the site plan, and so you
Yeah.
you have the ability to enforce that in a more intentional way.
right.
Any other questions? for staff? Do you feel comfortable making a motion this evening?
First, a few things that we brought up.
Well, so here's what I'm thinking, because we are in a public hearing and.
Have I closed the hearing?
Or no, but I don't think so.
I think I closed the hearing. I
Oh,
think I
did
said
you?
with that, I'll
Okay.
close the hearing.
So there's a possibility if you, I was gonna have this on the commission's agenda as a 20 to 30 minute workshop prior to the meeting, so that because this is kind of coming to you all without a little heads up. We haven't had a discussion about it previously. So I was just thinking we would have at least 20, 30 minutes to workshop any potential changes that they want to make to the language. So if you want to recommend to the commission your idea that they maybe look into that, amending the language. We could do that. But.
Yeah, I guess my only hesitation is. For one, just my lack of knowledge and understanding on this, I just don't know if. Is it necessary? It's kind of like I just want more data or information of like what would this policy affect? What would it affect?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
without really having a folks who wrote this, but it's hard to really know for sure what the logic or the rationale was, but I really believe that it was probably something to do with large subdivisions going in before we had, where there was still a lot of undeveloped land.
There was a period of time where there were many affordable USDA subdivisions going in, and given the fact that there's that line and they're related to affordable housing, my guess would be people got spooked about all these folks building these houses and wanted some, hearts and minds change slowly. People evolve with safe holds that make them feel more comfortable with change, and it may have made sense then. But that would be my guess, is when that was all happening 10 or 12 years ago.
It does seem largely irrelevant.
It just seems to me like it should be like setback related to height,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then like, would it just be easier to make it like that? Then it's like,
Which is what we have for multifamily, anyway. Is that what that said? Oh, no, it was just on the buffer. So there's a possibility of taking the buffer language and applying it to setbacks related to height above a
When we
certain
do
height.
multifamily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
might just be easier to.
It may be something with the density question that you're drafting right now, the 45 unit, start there.
well, yes, that one is on hold and it's going,
Sure.
yeah.
But
So
still,
it'll
like
be-
as a case study.
Oh,
of
yes, for
how
sure.
the
Yeah, that would
multifamily-
definitely be a consideration.
Okay, is there anyone who'd like to make a motion? We can continue discussion, but.
I'll make a motion. I move to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission to adopt the ordinance approving a land use code amendment to remove the project boundary buffer requirement for residential development.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second this motion. Any further comments, Steve?
Yeah, I think I still have a question in my mind of, are there gonna be some cases where somebody surrounding one of these local remaining large parcels could be affected by a large subdivision really pushing up against them? But I would have a hunch that's like probably largely irrelevant. I don't want to operate off a hunch, but I just think this could keep moving, and if y'all are gonna workshop it at the county commission, you know, and we're gonna have public hearing, well, that's the time to have your voice heard if this would affect you as a citizen, so.
Yeah.
That's my thought on it.
The commissioners might have some back knowledge to, you know, some historical knowledge to provide on the, to help maybe understand it.
So I would move to add an amendment to Steve's motion, to require the 20-foot buffer adjacent to in the open space or public lands, for subdivisions over 20 units, or just actually, you know what, scrap that first part, for subdivisions over 20 units to acquire it still for now. I think that's a good safeguard until we have more information. They don't have to adopt it that way. To me, if the intent, actually, here, let me see if there's a second, and then I'll give my justification. So this would maintain the buffer for over 20 units. Okay. So the justification is if the intent here is to support and encourage infill development, you're talking 4 or 5 houses maximum. Certainly with the few remaining parcels we have, you know, maybe if you tried to put 20 houses on one of those large lots, it might start to get a little. So at least that way we don't, you know, remove the, you know, it's ready. But I would personally like to see infill development be supported. It's how we stop from having to always go to high density, big developments. Infill development is how we get to graduated density. So that was my reason for the amendment. So.
Throwing something out there. Instead of units, would it be worth considering number of structures? In case we get into duplexes and that sort of thing, would that be allowable with the?
Put an alternative motion on the table. I honestly, I picked an arbitrary number because I think it will guide the conversation, not because I think it is. I don't know if it's 20 units or 20 houses or 20 something else, but I think I would certainly suggest some upper limit at least to guide the conversation. Personally, but if you want to put an alternative.
Dwellings versus, because you would count each duplexes, or each unit in a duplex, one dwelling, right? You could say dwellings versus
Yeah.
units.
So do you want to put it?
So I will propose an alternative motion. And carbon copy what you said, but change. But change units to dwellings.
So Steve offers an alternative motion to his original motion to require the buffer above, for subdivisions above 20 dwellings.
Right, and just to, so you're saying dwellings, so if it was like a duplex, 2 families, 1 dwelling.
What
I think
structure?
it's
One
two
structure.
dwellings, two dwellings.
Structure.
Okay, so I want
Structures.
structures.
I second your structure one. Okay. So we
Yeah.
have a motion by Steve to amend his own motion
Yeah.
to require the buffer of 20 feet for subdivisions with over 20 structures, seconded by Emily.
My justification on that
Yeah.
just being that, you know, so often we get into this single family kind of mindset. And just from what what I've experienced, like that may just not really be our way forward, especially in an economy like Moab's here,
That's
but.
fine. I agree.
So I guess that's the intent there, is to broaden that up to beyond just single family thinking.
I love that.
Single family home thinking.
Does anyone have an amendment to that amendment?
I'm gonna put more staff through it.
Robert's rule.
Chris Baird here. I'm getting pretty good with these Robert's rules. I'll tell you what. Let's vote on that amendment, and then if no further discussion, we'll vote on the original motion. So all in favor of amending Steve's original motion to removing the buffer except for subdivisions of over 20 structures.
Yes.
Yes, all in favor of that amendment. All right, that is unanimous. So now we have an amended motion on the table by Steve, seconded by Emily, to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission to adopt the ordinance approving a land use code amendment to remove the project buffer boundary buffer requirement for residential development except for any subdivisions with over 20 structures.
I hate to do this, but I'm throwing this out there.
Yeah.
A subdivision wouldn't typically propose structures unless it's a particular type of like overlay with a master plan or something.
Well, we talked about PUDs, so I think we run with it and we let the county commission do with it as they want.
And you can clarify the.
The intent.
Jump.
The intent is there. Yeah, I can explain the intent.
I really love when we get into these about 8:30 at night.
Oh, yeah, it's super crushing.
We've been in about 5 hours, yeah.
All right, so we have an amended motion on the table, to scrap this language except for subdivisions over 20 structures. Some form or other. Any additional comment? All in favor? That's unanimous. Look it up. That is it for our normal agenda. Any future considerations? Let us know if you're gonna be absent in August. We're gonna have, it sounds like at least one public hearing, so let Elisa know as soon as possible. Anything else?
Nothing, I was trying to think. I'm gonna be gone the next planning, right, Obi, because I have
Because
to,
you're off to,
I'm gonna be at KZMU. I
yes,
think
that's
talking about
right.
our water works.
Oh, no, not that one, because we're not having one on the 24th
Oh.
because it's Pioneer Day. So our next meeting.
That's
Oh,
right.
that's right, it's Pioneer Day.
Yep,
Shouldn't forget.
yeah. Hats off to our poor firefighters.
I'm talking to the state fire forester tomorrow.
I-70 is still closed.
Yeah, I'm talking to him tomorrow.
I sometimes forget.
Because you know, we don't have the ability,
No, I know, I know
Yes.
that, yeah, still.
but I'm meeting with him tomorrow.
I was just gonna say, Alyssa, sometimes I forget to tell I'm gonna attend the meetings. Like,
Oh.
it seems like you send out an email.
I just only wanna know if you're not gonna.
Okay,
Yeah.
only if we're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Until we get down to the.
Cause I was like,
limit.
well, I didn't respond, or I don't, anyways, okay.
Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor? Look at us go. Motion by Steve, second by Lee. Thanks,
Your
everybody.
eyelashes look fabulous.
There we go.
Oh, my gosh.
Ooh, all right.